Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for clicking on my channel and for joining me for this discussion of the case of Angel Bumpass. So, I had seen this case on a show called The Accused, and when I saw the case, it just completely blew me away. I hesitated doing a video about this case because I didn't think I could really do it justice, but I'm just gonna talk from the heart and just talk about it and see where it goes from there. So, back in 2009, a woman comes home from work and she discovers her husband duct taped to a chair, and his face was also covered in duct tape, was wrapped in duct tape. So she calls 911. EMT arrives, law enforcement arrives, and they discover that the man is dead. He had suffocated from the duct tape that was wrapped around his nose and his mouth. The case went unsolved for several years. So, fast forward now to 2019. A young lady by the name of Angel Bumpass gets arrested for failure to appear for court for some traffic tickets. When they arrested her, they ran her fingerprints. And they discovered that her fingerprints matched two fingerprints that were found at the murder scene of Franklin Bonner back in 2009. They arrest her, they charge her with felony murder, which is a murder committed in the commission of a burglary. And now her nightmare begins, and has entered into the fight of her life. So they arrest her for felony murder, and they also arrest a so-called accomplice by the name of Mallory Vaughn. Now, at the time that this crime was committed in 2009, the crazy part about this whole entire case is that Angel Bumpass was only 13 years old when this crime was committed. And her so called alleged accomplice, Mallory Vaughn, was an adult male. So they're arrested, they're charged. She pleads not guilty. Mallory Vaughn pleads not guilty, and the case now goes to court. During the trial, they were both tried together. And during the trial, obviously, it was extremely frustrating for everybody involved, including Angel herself, most of all. And her attorneys tried to reassure her that if Mallory Vaughn is found not guilty, you will also most likely be found not guilty. So, several witnesses come and testify throughout the duration of the trial. We get to know a lot about Angel's background, her upbringing. We find out that her mother was incarcerated for shooting a police officer while the police officer was transporting her from one jail facility to another. The police officer didn't die, but she did serve time for that. Angel was raised by her grandparents, who she herself claims was a very cold, unloving environment. During the trial, her grandmother testified on her behalf. The question was asked if the grandmother had any connection to the victim. The grandmother had said no. But during the time in 2009, when this crime was being investigated, when the grandmother was asked at that time if she had any connection to the victim, the grandmother said that she did know him and that she would buy weed from him. But in the 2019 murder trial of her granddaughter, the grandmother had said that she didn't know him at all and that she had never bought weed from him. Angel herself, she didn't testify, but Angel herself, her defense was she wasn't there. She didn't do this crime. She didn't know the victim. She didn't even know the accomplice. The accomplice also, his story was he didn't know who Angel was either. Like, these two people had no idea. They didn't know each other at all. But the prosecutor was painting the story that this adult male and this 13-year-old girl were running around committing burglaries and murder back in 2009. I think her grandfather and maybe other relatives came and testified. I think it was her grandfather that had came and testified that, Angel was a good kid. She was a good child. She was quiet. She was shy. She kept to herself. She didn't socialize much, and she for sure wasn't running around committing crimes. And I think they also said that she did well in school. So here she is at the age of 23 facing felony murder. She's the mother of two young children, two young girls. She was studying to go to school to become a nurse. She was living a very upright, just a regular life, a young single mother taking care of her children, trying to better herself when she was slammed with these charges of capital murder. So after both sides presented their story, one more thing that I forgot to mention is that during the trial, her attorney would constantly tell her that she wasn't looking pitiful enough because when they would show scenes or clips of Angel during her trial, she had a look of frustration, maybe anger, because you're being accused of something that you didn't do and it's carrying a very, very hefty price. And of course, she was upset. Of course, she was angry. Why would she appear remorseful or sad for something that she didn't do and wasn't involved in? So her attorney would constantly try to get her to change her attitude or change her facial expressions. And I don't know how you can pretend to not feel what you're feeling. And I don't know how you force your face to not show what you're feeling when you're facing something as serious as felony murder and possibly life in prison. So the jury goes to deliberate. They deliberate for about 5 hours. And by the way, the only evidence was the two fingerprints. There was no other evidence connecting her to this crime. No fiber, no hair, no DNA, nothing. No witnesses, nothing. Only these two fingerprints that were found on the duct tape that was found on the body of the victim. So after 5 hours, the jury comes back with both verdicts, and they find Mallory Vaughn, her so-called accomplice, not guilty. And so then I took like a sigh of relief. I was like, oh, thank God. Because the lawyer had said, if he's going to be found not guilty, most likely you're going to be found not guilty as well. So they came back with a verdict for Angel, and the verdict was guilty. And she was sentenced to 60 years in prison. I could not believe it. Absolutely could not believe what I was seeing. They had a fingerprint expert testify in court. She was on the side of the prosecution. And I remember the fingerprint expert saying that when it comes to the characteristics of a fingerprint, there's about 500 different characteristics of a fingerprint. They found about 100 characteristics that matched Angel's fingerprints from the fingerprints that were found at the crime scene. I'm inclined to believe that those were not her fingerprints, that possibly this fingerprint expert could have been wrong in her analysis. That's what I'm inclined to believe. She's 13 years old, committing a crime, running around with this adult. It just didn't make any sense. It made no sense to me. A lot of people criticized, and Angel herself also criticized her defense team, saying that they were not hard enough. They didn't defend her hard enough. They didn't call enough character witnesses for her because, this crime they're claiming that she was 13 years old when she killed this grown man, or that she was part of this crime it didn't make any sense. It baffled me. Now, what also angers me is that at the time when the crime was committed, she was 13, but they charged, she was charged as an adult. And I remember there was a very famous Kennedy case where one of the Kennedys had killed a young lady, killed a teenage girl. And for years, that crime went unsolved. But they finally had connected the crime to a Kennedy, and I forgot what his name was. They connected the crime to a Kennedy, but even though he was an adult when the crime was solved, they charged him as a juvenile, which I didn't understand that at all, because in this case, they connected this crime to Angel, and they charged her when she was an adult, but they charged her as an adult, even though they claimed she committed this crime when she was still a minor. So that was kind of weird to me how the law worked in that way, in the two separate cases. So now she is in prison. She is still incarcerated. She's going to be there for 60 years. There's a lot of petitions that are going around, organizations that are trying to get her a new trial because everybody believes that her representation was just horrible. It sucked. And for her lawyer to tell her, you need to look more sad or remorseful, I was just like, that's not what she's feeling. She has every right to be angry and pissed off. She has children to raise. She has a life to live, and she's claiming herself that she didn't do this crime. Why would she sit there looking sad and guilty and remorseful when she didn't feel that way, when that wasn't even the case? So I just couldn't believe that these two fingerprints and nothing else is what got her convicted. And I couldn't believe that this expert, this fingerprint expert, I mean, the fact that, she talked about how there's so many different characteristics to a fingerprint, but they only linked maybe like a handful of characteristics and just automatically connected those fingerprints to Angel Bumpass. I don't think that was enough. I think there was enough reasonable doubt, more than enough reasonable doubt, to find her not guilty. Evidently, I'm assuming that with Mallory Vaughn, her so called accomplice, they found him not guilty because there was no evidence at all linking him to the crime scene. No fingerprints, no fibers, no hair, no DNA, no witnesses, no nothing. But this is one of the saddest cases that I've ever seen. I'm telling you, when they came back with that guilty verdict, you could have knocked me over with a feather. That's how shocked I was. My mouth was wide open in disbelief. I could not believe that they had found this young woman guilty. Could not believe it, because I believe that there was enough reasonable doubt. I don't know if any of the jury members were ever interviewed to give an explanation of why they voted the way they did. When I try to research this case online, believe it or not, there isn't a lot of news articles on this case, or maybe I didn't look deep enough or I didn't search far enough. There's a lot of podcasts and YouTube videos and so on, but like hardcore news articles, I just didn't find enough of those about this particular case. But all I can say, is justice for Angel, and miracles do happen, and maybe one day she will be given that new trial that she rightfully deserves. I don't know. Thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate it. On your way out, please don't forget to rate the video. If you like this content, please subscribe, and I'll talk to you later.